Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to Northstar Politics, a weekly show hosted by myself, Noah, and my co-host Sean, where we'll be discussing everything from pressing politics to the odd and peculiar, from the halls of Westminster to the roads that we walk on. If you're anything like us, you probably found political media slightly boring and totally pointless. From bleary-eyed bureaucrats bleating about their boring phrases to ivory tower talk shows with no idea what's going on the street. And even politicians starting sentences with, "let me be clear," before proceeding to give no clarity. We're here to do politics slightly differently and a lot more ideologically. We think that hope and spirit has been lost from politics and from political discussion, and we're here to restore that. If this sounds like something that is interesting for you, then join us. Buy stocks low. We're starting in East London, but we're heading to the moon. Come along the journey and keep all eyes on the North Star. Let's get into it. So welcome, guys. Welcome to Northstar Politics.
Welcome.
With myself, Noah, who you might not have seen, and maybe the most famous TikToker in London.
I might take second most, perhaps.
Wait, Sean Ramiz, everyone.
Wow. Bro, I can't believe we've actually got here. It's taken a journey. It's taken so many people, on the one hand, actually asking me for a podcast directly, and then two, me trying to force you to actually come on camera for once in your life.
I know. It's been a journey for me to end up in front of camera. A lot of asking from this guy, but here we are. Yeah. But why are we here?
So I think the important thing to do is start from the beginning of when we met. And for me, I was a confused and lost soul in this palace of Oxford University, trying to make my way, state school educated, obviously, cool, East London based here, but North London through and through for myself. And then I met you at, was the Oxford Union Chamber?
Oxford Union itself, yeah.
Okay, nice. And what I'm reflecting on is basically our journey since then, and also the sort of expectations that were imposed on us at university versus really the kind of paths that we went down.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like Sean says, we literally met first week of university, both of us coming from state school backgrounds, and then bumping into each other in week one at the Oxford Union where we were attending a debate, just trying to get involved. And over the course of our time at Oxford, obviously became closer as friends, but also closer in terms of our political interests and our thinking about the world.
Oh, definitely. So I've always been a public sort of face, talking about politics, Islam, etc. Noah's always been behind the scenes, helping me.
Holding the camera sometimes.
Holding the camera. We've done some crazy stuff, the far right protests, Zionist protests. He was behind the camera at both times. And the main thing that made us come together to create this idea of Northstar was post-October 7th.
Yeah.
With the commencing of this genocide in Gaza, that was probably the critical juncture where we both became completely, or formalized our kind of alienation with the current kind of political sphere. Yeah,
so we're currently sat in Bow E3, and we were sat down the road at my mum's house on the couch, and we were just discussing how disenamored we'd become with the state of politics. And naturally, you grow up as young politically minded people from the ages of 11 onwards, and you're thinking, maybe becoming an MP is the way to make change, and maybe advocating for political change is the way to make change. And you see characters who are at the top of politics in the UK right now, who when we were growing up, some of them were heroes to us, and we thought they're going to make the changes. And they get into power, and you see them turn coat and turn their back on the people that put them there, and turn their back on the ideology that put them there. Which is where we developed this idea that we really need to center ideological thinking in politics. So even if, power interest might change, someone might have something over on you, you still keep your eyes on the North Star and stay true to your values.
100%. And I think one of the most interesting things about being at a place like Oxford, but also coming from communities that are so ingrained in your identity, is the sort of incentives and the structural kind of reasons why people sort of, betray their own backgrounds and their own upbringings. So the very tangible thing was that there was October 7th happens.
Yeah.
We're already alienated by the Labour Party because they've sort of started shifting further to the right.
Yeah.
Not kind of backing or representing those material class interests it was built off once upon a time.
Threw Jeremy Corbyn under the bus.
No, precisely. We decided to come together because we were absolutely shocked by the fact that these politicians who have built their whole platforms and identities of liberal democracy and human rights and freedoms just blindly started supporting the genocide. Keir Starmer, West Street in.
David
Lammy, you're going to get a session.
Yeah.
we decided to come together to actually create a sort of, or put our minds together and help in any way possible with the independent movements.
The independent movement, and now with the different left-wing movements you're seeing, we're doing all we can to try and support that. And we sort of thought, there's different channels by which you could support a change in politics. And one of them is putting boots on the ground like we have been doing. Another one is leading discourse, which is why we're here today on our new podcast. What we're going to aim to do is largely center around the politics of the day and our reactions to that, discussions of that. Towards the end of the podcast, which hopefully will make it there, we're going to get a bit more esoteric with it. We're going to hear some things from the deep, dark crevices of Sean's mind and my own. And we're going to set it up in a nice few sections to center the mainstream politics of the day, but then also get a bit tangential with it. We're going to have guests. We're going to have some famous guests that you might have heard of before, some more obscure guests that lean into our own interests. But it should be fun. And for you guys, I want you to be involved, everyone at home. There's going to be a broad and interesting discussion that includes loads of different perspectives. So if you want to follow us along, please, and I never thought I'd say this being someone that's not on camera, like, share, subscribe. You can find us on all the platforms. Sean's handling all of that, Vivo, Bebo, all the other ones, Deezer.
This guy's dating himself.
Radio, I don't know. Our producer's shaking his head. We're not on the radio, but we're here on YouTube.
And I think the key thing is that we are trying to produce content that's going to push the political imagination.
Precisely.
Right? For so long, people just think it's either Labour or Conservative, and you have to fit yourself into this box, and you're hiding behind labels of socialist or far right, all these sorts of things. We want to go a bit deeper than that and actually make content that connects with people in a way that understands them, their experiences, and their communities.
And I'm sure Sean's about to start rolling his eyes, but please indulge me. I'm a bit of a fanatic for classics, and etymologically, the word politics derives from the polis, which is the Greek city-state, the citizens of the Greek city-state. And at the end of the day, we've lost sight of that, especially in the UK with our glitz and glamour political media. And we want to recenter people's ideas and people's behaviours. The people.
So our first segment is going to be the state of play, where we're going to tackle news and cultural headlines this week. And the first thing I want to bring up is this idea of cracking down on protests in the UK. Now, as we know, and as the viewers have probably seen, week on week, far-right protests, anti-immigration protests, people threatening to burn down, hotels where migrants are staying.
Also some good protests.
Okay, yeah, don't worry. We're going to get into that. And then obviously the Pro-Palestine protests as well, right? Which week on week, a lot of, communities across the UK are protesting against the ongoing genocide. And the interesting thing is that the British state has recently said it will bring in measures to usher in further crackdowns on repeated protests. So what does this mean? Well, I'm quoting from the government now. It says, police forces will be authorised to consider the cumulative impact of protests, assessing previous activity when deciding to impose limits on protesters. And the context of this as well is that it's come straight after the news of the very tragic incident of an attack on a synagogue where 2 Jewish men died at the hands of a, Islamic extremist.
I want to make explicit in the law that those types of protests with cumulative disruption for communities can attract the same conditions and restrictions that apply to other types of protests, so that the police have absolute clarity that they can use cumulative disruption as a reason for restricting those protests.
So it raises interesting questions, right? Who actually decides when a protest is disruptive? And also, the thing I really want to hone in on is this false equivalence between actual pro-Palestine movements, which I think are being, even further scrutinized than the far-right protests. And given that, these far-right protests are actually genuinely violent. So Noah, let me get your thoughts.
I think it's concerning. Funnily enough, me and Sean bumped into each other randomly at a protest in Oxford. Jeremy Corbyn was in Oxford. You don't remember? Jeremy Corbyn was in Oxford to lead a pro-Palestine protest in what would have been 2020. So before October 7th, although some might have it that the troubles in Palestine started on October 7th. But me and Sean were there. He was one man up, I was one man up, and we bumped into each other there. And I think it's a massive shame that there has been a co-option of these pro-Palestine protests as anti-Semitic. And we've seen this tactic from a lot of mainstream media and certain political parties for years now to try and pit different groups against one another, so that those who are advocating for an end to a material genocide, slaughter, a cultural genocide, the expulsion of people from their native land, are being framed as though they have anything against Jewish people.
Yeah, and do you know what it is? It's like they don't even see the irony of their own logic, because this Islamic extremist, whoever this guy was, I don't know if he did the manifesto or anything like that. I don't know anything really about him, but people are assuming and people are saying that obviously this attack is motivated by his reasoning about not being able to differentiate Jewish people and the state of Israel. And so he's doing this as part of the pro-Palestinian movement or something like that. And this idea of literally generalizing, right, is a tale as, it's a tale as old as time. And it's just like the sort of conversation around it, it feels like you can't even be on the same page.
And I think what's concerning is that it's working. I don't know if you saw, but David Lammy was speaking outside the synagogue, I believe, the day after, trying to offer reassurance to the Jewish community in Manchester. And he was being heckled when he was discussing what the government would do to support Jewish people in the UK's safety. He was being heckled by members of the Jewish community who were saying, stop the marches. You support it every Saturday. And unfortunately, what that shows me is that just like on the one side, perhaps certain members of the pro-Palestine community have bought into this idea that there's an equivalency between Israel and Judaism. Similarly, those members of the Jewish community have unfortunately been sipping the Kool-Aid in understanding pro-Palestine protests as inherently anti-Semitic. And what this has allowed for Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, to do is to justify this curbing or curtailing of protests by buying into this or by buying a mandate from this fear.
And obviously, for the viewers at home, the ironic thing about this lady called Shabana Mahmood, who's our current Home Secretary, is that she is a practicing British Muslim. I believe she's Pakistani. And also, in 2014, she was literally photographed at a march for Gaza somewhere in London. And so...
On record, criticising Israel.
Yeah, I know. And it's the fact that this is the woman who is now policing the crackdown on Palestinian protests, where, may I add, they're literally centenarians. Like, do you know how old these people are at these Palestine protests? I'm seeing 83-year-old white English ladies getting arrested. And even if you want to get, I mean, I don't want to digress on this, but even if you want to get on the topic of where political capital is actually being spent and resources, hundreds of police protesters for these old people holding Palestine flags with a placard saying, I support Palestine Action, which is the recently prescribed terrorist group, in quotation marks. Honestly, I don't know how anyone can still support or even have faith in Labour after this.
And I think the idea that I want to reinforce is that members of the Jewish community, people that are pro-Palestine, are in no way your enemy. There are people that are anti-Semitic that support, that are anti-Zionist as well, but the two don't make a pair.
100%.
Okay? And similarly, members of the pro-Palestine community, as much as there is a lot of anti-Semitism in the air, don't let that coerce your mind into thinking that there's a strict adherence between the Jewish community and Zionism. And if you allow me to get a little bit theoretical here, when we talk about the real nature.
That's okay, because I want to get esoteric as well. So you go first. We
talk about the real nature of protest. There was an MP a long time ago, about 200 years ago, called Edmund Burke, who's seen as the father of modern conservatism. And he wrote a text called Reflections on the Troubles in Paris, or in France, pardon me, discussing the French Revolution. And he really laid out the handbook for how modern conservatism and sort of preservation of the status quo can be put in place. And to put it briefly, the idea is that you resist any change to the status quo, to the current power structure for as long as possible, until the protest itself threatens the power structure at its core, at which point you institutionalize that form of protest so that it becomes a further sort of pillar to strengthen the status quo. And what does this look like? This looks like efforts over the past 200 years to institutionalize protesting practices, applying for licenses to protest, when in fact, the real purpose of protest is deviance,
deviance, protests, police siren in the back.
As you can tell, I mean, maybe they're on their way to lock up a Palestine Action 80-year-old pensioner.
Sorry, I think it's more 90-year-old.
90-year-old even, who knows? And the older the better for the protest crackdowns. But yeah, the idea from Edmund Burke that governs a lot of modern conservatism is that we should reject protest until it threatens the status quo itself, at which point we should institutionalize it. And what we're seeing here is an effort to do that you can only protest in a certain way, otherwise you're going to threaten the status quo. And if you adhere to it, that's a tacit consent to this expression of power.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, we could get into another digression or rabbit hole about how the fact that modern conservatism is nowhere near actual theoretical conservatism that the likes of Burke and other thinkers actually sort of wrote about. I want to also move on to this.
Could I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
How do you feel as someone who attends protests, has attended protests, sees them as a somewhat meaningful way to express your political dissent? How that's going to impact your life as a political agent?
I think it's incredibly depressing. I myself can be quite pessimistic sometimes. And honestly, from a personal perspective, because I'm Muslim, that's the thing that kind of gives me hope. The idea that in the face of oppression and struggle, that this is just the kind of story that is what is demanded of people who believe in good in the world. So again, I said I didn't want to get esoteric, but we need to take it there. Like if you look at the story of the Abrahamic prophets and the kind of spiritual sages beyond the Abrahamic tradition, there is that undercurrent thematic meta-narrative or like narrative about being willing to suffer for the pursuit of truth. And I think even if people don't have that in the back of their minds while they're protesting, people naturally embody it, right? Because again, my sort of human nature view is that people are good people naturally, and so they will do the right thing. I think on the kind of esoteric point as well, the thing, just to kind of circle back to that earlier conversation around this pitting of Jewish people against Muslims, it's incredibly depressing because for most of human history, Jews and Muslims got along just fine. And the principal scapegoat in late modern Europe for just any political problem were Jewish people. And now it seems like those kind of same stereotypes and those same type of explanations around why things are going badly is being pinned on Muslim people now. And I think that's another thing we kind of want to do with this podcast as well, is hopefully try and expand our understanding of history and political knowledge in that sense as well. But I can throw that question right back to you though.
Yeah, I mean, on my end, maybe I can offer a hopeful tone, because this fear that the Labour elite and the political elite are showing for what, as we've said, are very much peace-minded protests, literally begging for peace on the streets of London and around the world, clearly are threatening them. Because they're working, they're effective. When we see the commitment people have to get themselves out of bed every Saturday morning to attend these protests all around the world. I don't know if you saw in Barcelona recently, there was a mass protest of 250,000 people demanding an end to the genocide. I think this shows that it's working, and the fact they're responding in such draconian form confirms this. And when we talk about this crackdown on protests that's trying to be put in place by the Labour Party, one thing that was going to be a theme of our discussions on this is we need to really be aware of murder on the margins. People are always looking for the clear blow that killed the person. But in fact, what we're going to see in modern politics, especially increasingly technical and complex society we live in, is murder on the margins. That piecemeal, piece by piece way in which things are constrained, things are censored, things are killed off. The marginal worsening in air pollution in the air in poorer boroughs that over time goes on to kill people at a much harder rate. And we need to be animated by that as political agents. We can't just turn up every 4 years and cast our vote or spoil our ballot. We need to actually respond to this forceful crackdown with an equally forceful level of protest.
And this kind of moves me on to my next sort of topic that I wanted to talk about in this idea of the state of play. And it's this idea of, is it really the case that there is increasing political violence in the UK? Because the assumptions that people are going into in this conversation is that, well, if I lean over and punch you, right? That's violence, right? Violence is a very direct, first order thing that happens in a very physical manner. But I think you have some interesting ideas perhaps around how that might not always be the case.
Yes, I think this summer, especially with what's happened in Manchester and what even recently happened, I believe, at a mosque, with a mosque being suffering an arson attack.
So two things even happened before that. 2 weeks ago, an imam got stabbed at a mosque. And, well, again, you don't really hear about that. But, carry on.
But I think we're always, it seems like, since I came to political consciousness, we're always at a point in time where people talk about it's getting worse and political violence on the rise, whether it be Lee Rigby or Joe Cox, the Labour MP, who unfortunately was killed. And I don't actually know, and statistically maybe I could be wrong here, but it doesn't feel like there is actually a change. We're always at a point where political violence is on the rise. The difference now, and it's something that I think is a big shame for Britain, it's one of the things I used to pride myself on being British, is that the language of political violence is on the rise, and it's being much more normalized in political discourse and in public discourse. When I was younger, I used to feel really happy knowing that, like, in the UK, whereas like the people in the US, free speech, I can say what I want. In the UK, well, no, you can't incite violence. And it felt like we'd come together as like a society. It's like, well, that's just off the cards. But now when we see these sort of implicit connotations with the flag hanging and the arrival outside asylum seeker hotels and calls to arson bomb asylum seeker hotels last summer, which people have totally fallen out of the mainstream news cycle, and even with the Unite the Union or whatever that nonsense was called in London, you're seeing videos of people literally inciting violence. I'm more concerned about that, because what that allows is for the government to feel they have a mandate to crack down more violently on people like Palestine Action.
And I think that's also why politics now feels so careerist and so lackluster of principles. And that's literally because the violence that people care about is only validated if it's linked to some sort of political calculus. So the reason why so much violence is being normalized, or rhetoric is being normalized around migrants, immigration, and Muslims as well, is because reform is on the rise. There is a clear contingent that believes in these ideas, believes in these narratives that the likes of the grifters like Farage and GB News, etc., are posing. It means that our political leaders, because the thing that they really care about, right, is their jobs, being a politician, etc., it means that they don't take the principled stance that they might even deep down believe, to actually uphold the values that, like you're talking about, those lost British values.
No, I agree. When we talk about values, I mean, I call this the Jekyll and Hyde generation of Labour. 2014, Shabana Mahmood on the streets alongside people like me and yourself protesting Palestine. Fast forward 11 years and she is cracking down on Palestine protests. Keir Starmer running for the Labour Party leadership on a Corbyn-like platform.
And may I add, a human rights barrister.
A human rights barrister, and now not even able to call the genocide in Gaza a genocide.
Despite the fact that his Labour Party members just voted, it was a genocide.
Precisely. I mean, David Lammy, where do we start? Literally calling Donald Trump a neo-Nazi fascist and someone that he should be barred from entering the UK. Fast forward, he's now shaking hands with him. And we talk about the North Star, we talk about ideology, and this shows a dearth, a lack of ideology, a total deficit of ideology. And it's pretty depressing. But when we think about what can we do about it, not just myself and Sean, but anyone listening, anyone who might just see themselves as a normal person, is don't allow this to become normal. Like, we shouldn't let politicians talk past. I know there was a brilliant interview by Beth Rigby the other day, interviewing Keir Starmer, where she talked about Donald Trump talking about London voting for Sharia law because it had a Muslim mayor. And
don't tempt me with a good time.
There we go. But he said, Beth Rigby asked him, is this racist? And he said, oh no, it's silly or it's daft or one of these words. And she said, no, but is it racist? And he just couldn't answer it. And we shouldn't allow them to just walk past that. This is what we talk about. In so much of political discourse is people just offering off-the-cuff responses because they understand that people will not push it further than that. They won't be held to account. And we talk a lot about accountability, but accountability, there's two sides to that. Someone's being held to account and someone needs to do the accounting. And if it's not going to be the average person, then it's not going to be done to the average person's standards.
And hence why you push the political imagination beyond the left and right dichotomy and actually look to actual alternatives, right? If the right can do it with reform, then so can we.
And one of the things the reform is getting very well is Nigel Farage comes across as very plain speaking, very direct speaking. People are sick to death of the umming and ahhing on daytime talk shows or politics shows where nothing gets sent. There's no informational nutrition to this. These are hollow calories.
And also, I just think he's very authentic as well. As in, I don't believe he's an authentic person, but he comes across as very authentic. Yeah. Right? And
he comes across as very ideological.
Yeah. But even in like the sort of age of social media, right? What has he done? He's become, his greatest political tactic was going on, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Right? To normalize the fact that he's just another person just like us and doesn't really have some harmful ideas.
And I think, on the one hand, we have this supervillain from our perspective, maybe. I say that in jest, Nigel. In Nigel Farage, who has this ideology, who has this character. but myself as well. But you become quite fond of perhaps a superhero on the left, a rising star.
Listen, don't put words in my mouth just yet, but I do think, and I am very impressed with Mr. Zach Polanski. So that's the other thing I wanted to bring up.
Who is this guy? Tell everyone at home. If you haven't heard yet about the great Zach Polanski, Sean's going to give you the appraisal.
Listen, he's making me such a fanboy right now. Listen, you can't be exposing my secretive text to you.
We're all fans. No,
so look, on the one hand, you have the right, they have the alternative, and now the left are trying to scramble together to find it, right? So you have two things. You have the Green Party, you have your party as well. So let's talk about the Green Party first.
Look at the state of the world. On the left, we have Green Party, your party, not even a mention of Labour. That's how far right they've swung. Keir Hardie is turning in his grave.
Yeah, well, I mean, there you go. So I wanted to move this conversation on to a different topic around alternatives that we have, right? So the Green Party, your party, my party, this party, I'm joking, right? So the Green Party, I know you have some hot takes on the Green Party, right? So I'm going to let you land, right? This is the section where we put out our hot takes.
No, you need to land first. Tell them your feelings about Zach Polanski.
No, so what I believe is that Zach Polanski is probably going to be, or is our only option for there to be, a Zoran Mamdani in the UK. Now, who are these people? Well, Zoran Mamdani recently basically won the New York mayoral election. The proper mayoral election is coming up, but in New York, Democrats always win. He's the Democratic candidate. The reason why he's cool is because he's young, progressive, a good-looking guy, may I say so myself, a Muslim as well.
भाइयों और बहनों, इस इलेक्शन में सिर्फ 20 दिन बचे हैं और चॉइस मेरे और एंड्रू कोमो के बीच में है.
And he's been able to galvanize a new political movement around a new type of politics that's moving away from the Democratic Party. And in particular, he's been hated by the likes of Trump, etc. Because, again, like I said, this is a Indo-Kenyan who's a practicing Muslim.
I don't think that's why he's hated by Trump. I think he's hated by a lot of these wealthy elite because he actually cares about material interests.
Yeah, well, I think there's like a sort of I mean, we could. There's two
Kash
axes.
Patel, Trump's right-hand man.
I mean, sure, but then I think Kash Patel's not a practicing Muslim, right? So there's a different sort of...
far be it from me to say.
As in, he's not even a Muslim at all.
Right? Fair enough.
Yeah. So as in, there's, of course, the material aspect of all of these things, but I think you can't discount the kind of racial element as well. So anyways, now comes along this kind of discourse of the left in the UK, right? People are searching for a political figure that can actually take us to actual political electoral success. Someone to sort of challenge the likes of Nigel Farage, right? We all thought in our heads a couple months back it was going to be Jeremy Corbyn. There was a lot
and Zara Sultana.
Well, I mean, some people thought it was Zara Sultana, but we could get into that as well. We thought that, these two figures, right, they already have their own, they're already MPs. One went independent, one was independent, would come together to create a new political movement called Your Party, right? And we'll talk about the different, like, sort of ups and downs of that. But the main thing to know is that coming out of nowhere was Zach Polanski for the Green Party.
The Green Party Renaissance.
Yeah, precisely, right? And Zach Polanski has come along and really shaken things up in a way that no one really expected, because he wasn't an MP before. He was actually just a deputy leader that was part of the London Assembly, right? So I think his job was probably just, I don't know, harassing Sadiq Khan or something like that on a day-to-day. But honestly, his messaging and his just political charisma is refreshing, right? You're having someone in the UK actually arguing for wealth tax. Yeah, it's actually arguing to hold billionaires to account.
And end to landlordism.
Yeah, end to landlordism, which is like a huge thing this week, right? Because in the Your Party that Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana have, there are literally landlords who are the MPs, right?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't even pass something like that. And I think on top of it all, it's about being able to have an excellent communicator, which Zach Polanski is, to put forward a progressive vision for Britain. And I think, I mean, you're giving me some Daily Mail headlines trying to make me sound like some fanboy over here, right? So don't put words in my mouth. But I do think people are buying into the vision, right? And so I think, the Green Party, didn't think it before, but could be a good progressive vehicle for the future.
Yeah, I think, to be perfectly candid, I think that's important. You know, if we say there's certain things we don't like about a certain party or political actor, that doesn't mean, you know, we can never work with them or we totally hate them. I've at some points in my life been skeptical of the Green Party. I voted for the Green Party before. I voted for other parties before. But what I think the Green Party is really captured right now is something that Zohran Mamdani did, which is material interests. You hear every single politician, every election cycle get up there and say, we're going to help the working person. We're going to put an extra pound in the working person's pocket, Keir Starmer growth and all these sorts of things. But they don't really talk about the mechanism about how that will happen. And what I think Zach Polanski's captured is explicating the mechanism by which we will improve the state of play in the UK economy and therefore in UK society. He's correctly, in my view, addressed some of the most pervasive problems that are suffocating the UK economy: landlordism, a rentier economy, drastic inequality, wealth inequality. And he's also correctly addressed some of the most pressing issues for the political environment of the UK to address: the genocide in Gaza, our culpability for that, our providing weapons parts for F-35 drones, jets.
Yeah.
So I'm very hopeful for Zach Polanski, and in fact, the political communication that he has developed. At the start, when he first took the leadership of the Green Party, I was slightly worried. He didn't come across as the most effective communicator, but he really has captured something beautiful, both in terms of how he comes across and the type of politics he's trying to engender.
No, definitely. And I think that the interesting thing that he's done that others couldn't, actually, before I even say that, I think people are just on their knees for the bare minimum as well, and basic standards of politics, where with the your party splits and the kind of infighting, that was even more tiring for people. And the fact that they have actually, like, you know, a long-standing political structure, and then now you have a good leader in front of it, that's very refreshing. But then on top of that, they've been able to actually build an effective coalition. And that's shown through the actual deputy leaders. So you have Mothin Ali, who's a practicing Muslim, and you have Rachel Millward, who is known for being quite like a prominent feminist in the area, very progressive as well. And so the three of them together, right, is actually kind of like the poster for a progressive movement in Britain. And I think that them being able to iron out that conversation, which maybe we can do a bit now, right, around the tensions between, you know, perhaps more personally conservative views.
I mean, I've got a hot take. We're going to get into a section. I've got a hot take on that.
Yeah. And you know, the more progressive views and things like that, I think they've done really well to actually come out fighting, really. So we won't cast judgment just yet. We're going to wait to see. We're
hopeful, but we are hopeful.
Yeah, definitely. And I
Zach
think
Polanski, come and sit here. Come and grab a cuppa.
But then I think, like, if they got their act together, hopefully that inspires the others to get their act together as well, because I don't think it's actually, with this particular movement, a zero-sum game, right? It's a rising tide that can lift all boats.
The final question I want to ask before we head to our next section on that is, he's playing in tricky waters now. When you start to threaten the material interests of the ultra-wealthy, of the elite, and we've seen what happened to Jeremy Corbyn when he was leader of the Labour Party. When you start to threaten the financial interests of the 1%, they leverage everything they can to neutralise that threat. The Green Party conference was last week, and they just laid out motions to bring an end to a landlordism and a rentier economy, a wealth tax and such and so forth. How do you think this plays out for him?
Well, I think, you know, you can look at history and be worried about the fact that political leaders have been derailed, and once establishment interests feel threatened, they are going to attack. But to be honest, I actually still am hopeful and optimistic, because now the game's on social media. The game's not on the tabloid press and the newspapers, and access to information is so vast that any sort of propaganda that's imposed by the powers that be won't cut through in the same way anymore. I mean, we've seen that with Israel and Palestine. My favorite quote from that is the fact that the Palestinians are showing us what's happening versus the Israel are trying to tell us what's happening, right? And I think that because he also has a good social media as well, that can be like, I'm not really worried about the fact that he's not going to be able to get his messaging out. And also, I mean, they can't really do the anti-Semitic smears against him because he's literally Jewish.
They might try.
Yeah, they might try. You never know with these guys. They might still try.
I think also there's something to be said about, hopefully there's an opportune moment where the political elite and wealthy elite who might try to sabotage the aims of Zach Polanski have run out of cultural capital. They've lost their credibility because they've stretched it in one way and the other too many times that people just don't believe it anymore.
Precisely.
And you can see that in terms of whether they're right or not. People are not even listening to David Lammy when he calls Nigel Farage a racist and these sorts of things. Whether that's right or wrong, people on the right are no longer even swayed by that. In the same way that us on the left should not be swayed by the predictable attempts to disparage Zach Polanski and the Green Party and other members of the left-wing movements.
Well, I think people are so impoverished that any sort of elite trying to sell them a narrative is simply just not going to work anymore.
Yeah.
And so the thing, if there was something I'm worried about, is this idea of like cutting across the political divide to actually get the support where you need to get it to actually have real electoral success. That remains to be seen.
Okay. We're about to get into a section where, although we've been kind of in accord right now, we're going to create some discord. We think that it's a useful way to engender some political debate and also work out our ideas. We call this section Let Me Land. For those of us not from London, what Let Me Land really means is you've got an idea. It's under a bit of pressure from your collocutor, from the person you're speaking to. But just let me land. Let me try and land this plane, even if it might be in choppy winds. So one of us each week will come with a hot take, bring a hot take to the table, and the other will do the best to chisel away at it till we find something in the middle. Okay, let's get into Let Me Land. There's the part of the show where I prepared a homemade hot take for Sean to examine, put under pressure, and you guys in the comments can work after, did I land it? Did I land it? 9 times out of 10 against this guy, I will land it.
Impossible.
Just ask me.
Absolutely impossible.
So I've got today
Go on.
is the clear as day statement. No matter how much we praise Zach Polanski, the Green Party cannot save us.
All right. So you're going to have to expand on what you meant by cannot save.
No, don't worry, I will. And what I mean by that is, yes, the Green Party doing great things. I hope they continue to do great things. Since Zach Polanski's become leader, I think they've added maybe a 10% membership vote share. I think there's problems with the Green Party historically in terms of how they're perceived and in terms of who they can get on board, even down to the name, which means that they will struggle to be the main party of the left or a totalising party in British Parliament and form a government. I also think there's big problems that have plagued a lot of left-wing movements over the past years in terms of, although we might all have the same material interests, we're all part of the working class, the lumpen proletariat, we might not have the same social convictions. And when those are weighed equally, that can cause a lot of contention. And what I mean by this is, to cast a broad swathe, we might have people that are both materially have similar interests economically, but socially we might have someone who could be seen as quite conservative in terms of their feelings towards women, reproductive rights, LGBTQ community, and just general cultural progression. And on the other hand, someone that is very progressive and sees that as perhaps a cornerstone of their political commitments, very pro reproductive rights, very pro LGBTQ community. And that can provide a big cause for contention among the left wing.
So just because of the existence of this tension, are you somehow suggesting that that's going to be the sticking point for why the Green Party can't save us in the future?
No. So what I think is that the Green Party is going to take up one of those slots. And what it looks like taking up is, everyone's agreed on the material interest. We're economically progressive.
Okay.
Or economically, let's say, egalitarian.
Okay.
We prioritise equality.
Yeah.
But the Green Party is taking up the section of socially progressive.
Okay.
That's very much a core, and has been a core theme of their politics for the past 20 years. But there's going to be elements of the left wing, the economically left wing, the economically egalitarian, perhaps religious people who don't have those same social convictions. And a big thing I always think about is primary political personalities. Although someone might be poor, they might see themselves first as a Christian. They might see themselves first as a Muslim. So although their economic interests are aligned with other members of the working class, they vote based on their primary political personality. And we live in a live in a first past the post system, and we need to get together enough constituencies to form a government. We need to be able to curry favour with both the socially conservative but also socially progressive members of the working class.
Yeah, so I think that's fine. That makes sense. But then that's not particular to the Green Party. That's just the problem with the left in general. And as opposed to sort of like starting the premise of saying, oh, they can't save us. Well, maybe they can, maybe they can't, but at least they're trying to, right? So sure, there's that sticking point, that tension exists. However, the deputy leader is literally a practicing Muslim, prays 5 times a day. And he literally got elected despite actually not giving in to many of the rhetoric that the party members wanted him to, talking about on things like gender. He refused to basically, define if he thinks trans women are women, that type of stuff, right? And so whilst I do appreciate that this tension exists, they've actually made some pretty good first steps towards resolving it. Not necessarily long term, but just in terms of their brand and identity. Now, the thing that I find the most convincing about what you said about the Green Party in particular is this idea of branding, and then what image do they have in people's heads currently and voters. For that, I think the jury's out, right? Messaging is built by action, right? Like the idea that even the brand Spotify, what is Spotify? What does those words mean? It means the things that people know it for, its values, right? And so if these leaders are really, really good, right? So my thing is like, if these leaders, the people leading it, right? Zach Polanski, Mohsen Ali, Rachel Millward, if they're able to actually impose that vision top down in a way that's convincing to people, I think like there's a lot of chance like they could quote unquote save us.
And I hope they do. But my thing is that we need to address on the left this tension between socially conservative members of the left and socially progressive members of the left. And the longer we go about avoiding that, the more chance there is that this tension is going to blow up in our face, as it kind of has done recently. And I think what we need to be more comfortable with is agreeing on the fact there's going to need to be a coalition of left-wing identities, a coalition of left-wing parties. They represent perhaps slightly different positions socially, but are aligned on their economic incentives. So as much as I hope the Green Party can save us, at present time, I think we're going to be looking towards a coalition of left-wing parties rather than just a Green Party saving us.
I think we're definitely moving towards a multi-party system. However, I don't think this, again, is like a particular problem that the Green Party has to deal with, but it's more just a people problem that is up to the people who want to help articulate and make a cohesive vehicle for change, i.e. the parties and the politicians. It's up to them to kind of resolve it. And so even though, this is a problem that we have to solve, I think the Green Party is actually the ones who are actually making the steps to do it in the way that other politicians probably aren't.
I hear it. And as I say, hopefully I landed that.
So
if not...
he hears it though. So
no,
maybe
I do hear it. But this isn't just about me bouncing ideas off Sean and vice versa. We want to hear what you guys are saying. So get commenting. You're as political as we are. You're not just viewers, participants. I'll read all the comments. Sean, his brain's a bit fried, a lot of brain rot. He's more on scrolling, but I will read the comments.
That's how you know I want it, because he's hitting me with that.
So let us know.
Now, this part of the segment is called the Echo Chamber, where myself and Noah, we do agree on a lot of things, and we kind of want to just bounce off each other and bring our WhatsApp convos to real life. Maybe not all of it, to real life.
Please, not all of it.
About things we deeply agree on and we're deeply passionate about. And so the first thing I kind of wanted to bring up, and let me give some context as well, but this is the essay question we have to solve, right? How much coalition building can really be done with people who are seen as bigoted? So what do I mean by this? Gary Stevenson has recently supposedly alienated a lot of ethnic minority people and people from our communities by recently coming out saying that you have to appeal to those disaffected reform voters and traditionally English people who might have some racist or kind of harmful ideas around minorities on a class basis, right? Because to build a real political movement, we need to focus on common needs.
I think there is a risk that the left gets very, very angry and starts to be really, really aggressive and accusatory towards people who might be voting for reform.
The reason this has absolutely infuriated some people is because the suggestion is that for the greater good, you actually have to tolerate this anti-immigrant sentiment and accept these differences for the purpose of unity. But that's problematic because it's like asking us black and brown bodies to just accept hate against us again and build a coalition with people who literally think our cultures are basically inferior, when shouldn't it be the opposite way around? Shouldn't it be the case that we set the tone and we set the kind of political rhetoric, that we set the standard that people need to meet? It's a difficult one. I'm a bit conflicted on it, but your clarity is always welcome, of course.
No, I think that's interesting, and I appreciate you for bringing that out of the echo chamber. I have thought about this a little bit because, as you know, I've been a big fan of Gary Stevenson for many years. I actually emailed him back in the day trying to work with him.
I got you the trading game book.
You literally got me the trading game book as a present.
Yeah.
So Gary, respond to my email and come on the podcast. But yeah, I think there's a lot of tension there because the first thing I want to say is, like, Gary is a single issue guy. He's really about the wealth tax, and he's quite clear on the fact that he's a single issue guy, and there's his one goal, is to get together enough support from the people that the Labour Party or the party in power can't ignore him, basically to co-opt a voter base to then act as sort of the captain steering that ship. So I think we need to recognise that with Gary, that he's not a plural or pluralist or multifaceted politician. He's a single issue guy. But I think he is moving into dangerous rhetoric here because he is losing sight of the lived reality of people, which is multifaceted. Although we might experience from material impoverishment, people like ourselves also experience the material impacts of racism, the material impacts of a rise of fascism, the material impacts of a rise in violent language towards ethnic minorities. And Gary himself, obviously as a white man, is not particularly exposed to that, but I think it's dangerous to lose sight of that. And I think for Gary himself, finance background, economics background, I can never quite work out what university he went to. I wish he would mention it. But I think perhaps he is getting too fixated on his single issue material goal and forgetting that the material reality of black and brown people, ethnic minorities, is impacted by this fascist language. And we don't want to normalise it, even if it's at the cost of delaying this wealth tax, delaying the wealth redistribution, because we don't want to, as much as you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, you don't want to bring something bad in with the good.
No, I agree. And I think, honestly, personally, it's actually really conflicting for me because I think like much of the racist rhetoric that is galvanizing the far right is obviously against Muslims. And so on the one hand, the actual Islamic way to kind of combat this is kind of the Gary Stevenson way, which is a shock horror. Like, you actually kind of need to invite these people into your house, invite them to the masjid, tell them to come and experience your community and change their sort of views in that very kind of human way, appeal to what you have in common, which, to be fair, I think that's kind of what Gary's talking about, even though, of course, he is a single issue person. But at the same time, it's, sorry, I'll let you land, don't worry. But at the same time, it really is an absolute injustice to accept the normalization of these attitudes. And so I think on a personal level, that's what I'd sort of approach. But then on the wide political
It's interesting
level,
what you say, because I think just digging down to what you said is a brilliant example.
Yeah.
Because I guess the difference is Gary didn't recognize that these people are fascist in their rhetoric and are racist in their rhetoric, and nevertheless we should invite them into our progressive movement so that they can ameliorate their opinions and we can progress together and collaborate. Which I think the example you gave about how a Muslim would behave, even if someone hates Islam, we should invite them into the masjid, we should invite them to our home so they can see the benefit of the way we live and they can become they can warm together. What Gary did is actually say, he's not going to call them fascist. He's not going to call them racist. So I think now I'm realizing that is the dangerous part. Yeah. So perhaps what would have been better for Gary to do there is to say, I recognize there is a rise in fascism. People are spouting a lot of fascist rhetoric, a lot of racist rhetoric, and we should challenge that. But on my issue, I'm going to want their support, not in terms of their political opinions, but in terms of their economic commitment to a wealth tax, which is my single issue. So we can collaborate. We don't have to throw you out because we're going to have to live with you. And I think we're moving past the era of cancel culture where we have to realize we have to live with these people even after we say they're terrible people. So fascist or not, I'm going to want to work with you towards this wealth tax. And if we get into a political discussion, I'll disagree with you on that point as well, rather than rejecting or trying to cover up the fact that these are detestable opinions that these people hold.
Precisely. And I have nothing more to add because this is quite literally the echo chamber. And
no, exactly. And week by week on the echo chamber, we might bring the weird and wonderful out of our brains, or we might bring something a bit more topical, such as that. But I think it's important to think about the things that are just going on in our mind, bring it to the table, and see what comes of it.
Definitely.
Gary, that's our recommendation to you. As I say again, still a big fan. Still would love to have you on the podcast. Still need you to respond to that email.
Just to educate him, he should actually be here right now. He should be sitting right between us, and then we'll actually tell him.
If you did that interview with us, we wouldn't have let you go down that rabbit hole. We would have saved you, Gary. But still. So, our first podcast. How do you feel?
No, you know what? It's alhamdulillah. I think there's a lot of space to grow, get our ideas out there. I think the format is a bit weird even for us. We've never done this before, but I think like I'm glad we're actually doing it for once.
As much as we might be loud and braggadocious on camera, we'd love to get your feedback. So please, we're here begging. As I've seen everyone do on social media, I never thought I'd be one of those people. But subscribe, send it to someone that might be interested, repost it, comment. That's the big one, I think. So I actually want to hear what people think.
Because I think what we want to do with this as well is build a community of like-minded people. I suppose an echo chamber of our own, if we want to get down the algorithmic kind of chat. But look, we know how people are feeling. We're from so many different communities, right? We're both Caribbean boys from the Muslim community. You're basically from the Muslim community, from East London. And I think we want to galvanize all these sorts of different views and use the feedback to actually power this journey and this progress. And also, we're doing this for the love of the game. Yeah, this is out of our own pockets. We're not sponsored by anyone. We're not getting any money.
Sponsor us.
Yeah, please do. Obviously, special shout out to Restless Beings, the charity who's given us this space, because they do really amazing work. And actually, if we're paying anyone to do this, I'd rather it go to
charity.
a good cause.
And I think bit by bit over the course of the episode, you'll get to know us a bit better.
People know me, man. Come on.
But I mean, people know this guy. You know, you can't get anywhere in London without seeing this guy. But maybe you'll get to know me a little bit better. I'm famously an open book. I'm classic Caribbean closed wall. But bit by bit, I'll start to open up on camera. But at the end of the episodes, I think it'd be great for us, as much as there's a lot of brain rot going on, to maybe offer some brain food.
Definitely.
And put people onto things we're reading, things we're looking forward to, things we're thinking about. You got anything to bring to the table?
Well, there is quite literally something on the table at the bottom. I think it's quite controversial because I feel like throughout the whole shot, Muhammad's name, peace be upon him, has just been throughout. Yeah. So this book is one of the greatest seeras, so stories of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And it's done in a very detailed way, written by a man called Martin Lings, who was a convert to Islam. From Britain. He was an Englishman, studied at Oxford University, I think Cambridge as well, and he's one of the most prolific writers in Islamic history. And I think the reason why I want to bring that to the forefront today is because today we're obviously focusing on political violence and these sorts of things, and I think it's important, like, for anyone just to really understand who the founder of Islam really was, and demystify it a lot. So that's a book that's brought a lot of clarity to me personally and many people across the world. What about you, Noah?
Nice. I mean, and also we'll leave links in the comments, in the description, so that people can access these resources. And anything, if you've heard us speaking about something, you want to recommend something to us, put it in the comments.
Sure.
Knowledge seekers. We're trying to be knowledge seekers.
Now we're trying to be knowledge givers as well.
Knowledge givers as well, but we're still true to our knowledge seeking ways. For me, honestly, what have I been up to? I think something I want to recommend is at the Royal Academy in Green Park or near Green Park.
Oh, really? You go to exhibitions and stuff, yeah?
There's a brilliant exhibition actually by an artist called Kerry James Marshall, which deals a lot with African Americans, and he paints black people in a very obscure way, which is something I love. Some of my favorite artists, people like Singer Sampson, who paint black people in a very obscure way. Historically, black bodies have been something for interrogation by colonial or white supremacist minds, to be picked apart quite literally and scientifically. So I find there's something quite protective, safe in the obscurity with which Kerry James Marshall portrays the black man and black woman. So I thought it was just a stunning exhibition. Really loved it. And it's very much worth anyone's time if they get around to it.
Fair enough. We get it. You're a performative male.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like,
catch him at the coffee shops, this coffee shop, drink a little bit of coffee, reading a little book, exhibitions.
You know, I love the finer things. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for joining us for the inaugural. Sean didn't want me to use that word, but I think it's grandiose enough to...
Look at these words, inaugural, grandiose.
To fit the moment. The inaugural episode of the Northstar Politics Show. We'll be back again next week, and hopefully every week from then on. Support us along the way. Get involved in the journey. We're very much just trying a ting, and we're going to see where this goes.